Welcome to As the Story Grows. I'm Brian Patton. Today we welcome Ben and Frank from Earthside to the podcast. Earthside released Let the Truth Speak back in November. Let the Truth Speak did make my favorite 50 releases of 2023 list. You can see that whole list over on Substack right now. The album is an absolutely incredible listening experience, and I highly recommend giving it a spin. A link will be in the show notes. The guys talk about their friendship and the journey to forming Earthside, putting the time and effort into each song as if it were an album, and a lot more. This is the first episode of 2024, and if you're looking at how to get more involved with the podcast this year, join the Patreon page and help be a part of keeping the lights on. I'm about to share an Albums That Mattered podcast episode about Caspian's You Are the Conductor. $3 a month gets you that episode, early access to every podcast, a shout out, and more. You can always join the mailing list over on Substack or come hang out in Discord. Links will be in the show notes. And as always, the best way to support the show is to share an episode with your friends. Tell your circle of influence. Let people who love this type of music know that there's this cool podcast they should be listening to. I hope everyone enjoys today's chat with Ben and Frank from Earthside.
The next touring leg that we're doing.
Yeah, I had your dates up earlier. I was like, oh, that's super rad.
I think that's the first time we will have played DC. We have generally hit Baltimore on the tours that we've come through, and it'll be cool to finally get out there. Yeah.
It seems like a lot of the like heavier music genres have like shifted to Baltimore post COVID, and like there's a lot happening out there, even before COVID, I guess. I'm from DC. I lived in Philadelphia, and then like the end of the pandemic, moved back to DC. So
I get you. Yeah, it's a similar deal out here in Connecticut. It's hit or miss as to whether people will want to come out here. We don't have a market in the same way that like every other major city or every other city around us has. Yeah. So it's just like, you might as well go to New York or Boston or Rhode Island or take your pick anywhere but here. Right.
Which is interesting because it seems like Connecticut has a strong music scene and there's a lot of bands coming out of there, even as small as it is, right?
Yeah. And I've even seen kind of more of that lately with like a lot of the newer, a lot of the more up and coming metal and hardcore or metalcore bands, lot coming out of here. Maybe we'll have more of a scene and more venues supporting that in the coming years. It'd be cool to see.
Yeah, for sure. What's up, Frank?
Hi.
Well, welcome, guys. Stoked to have you on. The new album's incredible.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, it's like I love albums that are an experience to listen to, that like just like take you on a journey, and then with lots of twists and turns, and so like this was like a surprise, like just joy to listen to. So
that's so
awesome.
You don't love just only listening to playlists with like random singles of bands and instant gratification?
That's not really my thing. I do just like beat down hardcore that's like the same riff for 20 minutes. Like I'll listen to Madball all day, but not all the time.
Time and a place.
Yeah, there's a time and a place.
Yeah, that's cool that you say that. I think for me especially, and I think to some extent for all of us, like the album experience, or the album that is really an experience in and of itself, was such a pivotal thing in all of our development, and kind of just making us want to even do what we're doing. The idea of an artist kind of just taking you on this really immersive journey through worlds you've never been before, in all these different levels of loud, quiet, complicated, simple, all different emotions. There's something really special about that I think, unfortunately, we haven't seen as much of in recent years, with some of that instant gratification culture that Frank was speaking to. But I think that was really something that we were trying to hit with this record.
Yeah. Yeah. We're just here in the conversation, so let's just go for it. Like, when you're trying to compose music and like write an album, like, are you concerned or thinking about like Spotify and playlist culture and like the digital media landscape, or are you just like, this is our thing and we're just doing what we want to do, and the people who are fans will come along for the ride, and if they're not, then whatever?
Well, I mean, of course we think about it, but we're not doing the writing for it. It's more like we have the inspiration for what we write and what we came up for the record.
Yeah.
But it's, when we think about it, it's more like, how are we going to, put this into the world of all of that? So like, it doesn't affect how we're making the music, but in the back of our minds, we're like, oh man, like how will we succeed with this, with that landscape? So that's probably more the way we think about it, rather than it informing how we create the music we create.
It's really bizarre too, because we just saw our friends in a kind of alternative rock progressive band that we really like out here and have worked with, called Head with Wings. And apparently they're dealing with some nonsense with Spotify right now, where their monthly listeners have shot up because Spotify, and this has happened also to another progressive band, because Spotify has handpicked one of their interlude tracks and like is feeding it to people. And it's just like, yeah, you shot up like many thousand, but it's because Spotify is completely misprioritizing what they're giving people. Like, people are probably walking away thinking, you make kind of cool 30, 45 second interludes. That's what this band is. It's a very, very weird age to be in, making art music.
Yeah. Yeah, I read a thing recently where they were talking about Spotify, and like bands get playlisted and their numbers go up, but then they get taken off that playlist and the numbers dry up, and it's just like you're back to your baseline fan base. Like, you didn't really gain people. It's just people streaming shit on the playlist.
Yeah, it's so not geared toward kind of the spirit of music or art. It is pure commerce in its kind of its ugliest form. We tell people, like, yeah, make sure to stream our album on this evil platform.
Right. I interviewed someone at the beginning of last year, and I was listening to the album on Spotify, and the album is just like how awful the machine and digital media is. And it's just like, I'm like, yeah. And then in the middle of the album, this ad pops up on Spotify. And I'm just like, damn it. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go back inside. What got each of you into music?
Go. You can start, Ben.
Okay. So for me, my very first exposure was hearing Tower of Power in the car with my parents, like from as far back as I can imagine, as like a little kid, and really reacting to, I think, the syncopation of the music and like the crunchiness of the horns and the really powerful vocals. Yeah. And then from there, I got into, we didn't all know each other early on, but Jamie and Frank knew each other, and I met Frank later on. He introduced me to Jamie, but we were all nu metal kids, and we grew up in the era of like Linkin Park, Incubus, System of a Down. They got me into Seven Dust, Deftones, and yeah, alternative music, just really alternative rock and metal really pulled me in, as it did the other guys. And yeah, from there, Frank came to my high school for a couple of years, and we both had a really dreadful experience there, but kind of commiserated. as like the couple people who were just like all in on art and music at the school. And Frank eventually couldn't stand it anymore and left. I kind of wish I had done the same, but I chalk it up to necessary artistic suffering. Yeah, I mean, it's the classic experience of like, you really just at the right age connect with music on such a profound level that you can't imagine doing anything else. You can't imagine not putting your all into it.
I think for me, I was just thrown into music. I don't even have a memory of when I started music because my parents basically put a violin in my hand when I was 4 years old, and I just started to play music. So my mom was a singer and was involved in music in her 20s and 30s, and I think she wanted us to kind of get some experience within music at an early age and just see what happened. And just so happened to I just happened to latch onto it. But I think more of where I started to have an interest and love for music was, I think, when I kind of discovered I could write songs. And once, I had been practicing, classical music and learning music, but then once I had met Jamie and he was learning music as well as a young child. And at some point we just kind of like decided, I don't know how it happened, but we would just play around with our instruments and eventually like, oh, hey, this is like our own thing. And that became really interesting to me. So I think from then on, my focus was always within like actually creating something, whether it's the composition or the production of something. That's where my interest ended up going. And eventually I got into Berklee College of Music. I went for a year and I transferred out of it because I didn't want to practice. I didn't want to be an instrumentalist. I didn't want to practice my instrument, and I wanted to be creative and learn in the way that I wanted to. So I just ended up going to a super hippie college where you make up your own course of study. So that's my story. But yeah, there's so much more in it. But like I said, I've known Jamie, for example, since I was starting to write music, and him and I were basically doing that at the same time.
Nice. Back
in our early kind of childhood.
Nice. Ben, what led you to drums?
Oh, yeah, I was thinking about that. I didn't get to that. Yeah, it's similar to Frank. There was never a point. I still ask myself to this day, because it's like, it's kind of a random thing for me. Mm-hmm. There was never a point in which I decided to play drums. Like, I got, in a very rock and roll way, kicked out of preschool for aggressive, disruptive behavior. And lo and behold, this is like the legendary story, or one of them in the band. Because I was just, people would give me something, a teacher would give me, and I'd just start hitting it. They're like, this kid has like emotional problems and like he's aggressive. And my parents were like, no, at home, he hits all the pots and pans. He picks up the chopsticks and starts playing on the table. He's a drummer. And they actually had to get a doctor's note from Jamie and I, without realizing it, for 20 years, or not 20 years, but like for all of adolescence and childhood, saw the same pediatrician. And the pediatrician watched me do my thing. And he was like, in a very clinical, like hoity-toity kind of way, like, he appears to be a percussionist of some kind. like in a very like, oh, he's like an orchestral player. But yeah, he had to like formally write a letter to this preschool for my parents to like get money back and like not have it be like a thing like, oh, Ben has all these issues, which I do, but they're very different issues. Yeah. And yeah, so I mean, it was just something that I guess I always had gravitated toward before I even had like the mental wherewithal to like think about it. I got like a kind of one of those electronic pads as a little kid my parents gave me. Start thinking around them like cardboard drum, or not a cardboard drum set, but like a really crappy drum set.
Yeah,
then a better crappy drum set, then an okay drum set, and it's always been with me. I think I've always latched on to the rhythmic part of music, but through being with these guys and kind of seeing what an amazing process it is and what an amazing form of expression it is to write music yourself and put yourself out there in that way, that maybe for me became an even bigger passion than just being maybe a cool drummer.
Yeah. How'd the band get started?
I mean, basically, part of it, we kind of touched upon some of the aspects of the story in there, but I mean, basically, as far as the band goes, without doing a 3-hour presentation of all the details, as I alluded to, I knew Jamie from growing up. We lived in the same town. We lived actually one street away from each other, so we were always kind of growing up, learning music together and sharing music together. And we formed our own projects. We tried to start bands. We were always kind of involved in musically together. And as Ben alluded to, I transferred to a private high school that I didn't really want to go to, and I met Ben there, and it was like, oh, this is like the only other serious musician here, and also surprised that there was another extremely talented musician who was also there, who is a guitarist, but it was like, how did the three of us like end up at this school? It kind of made no sense because they didn't care about their music program and like put no money into it.
Yeah.
So I think part of the lore of the band is like we ended up in these like situations that are like these like weird 1 in a million things where, with Jamie, it's like being in a town of 4,000 people and living next to like, someone who's kind of a musical genius, like right down the road. And then like going to this other school where there's only 70 people in a class and you happen to, meet someone who is, on his way to becoming a world-class drummer. So, to me, like it feels like you meet those kind of people in like a music conservatory or whatever, not in like random suburbs of Connecticut or whatever. Basically, once I had met Ben and started jamming with him, I think at some point I was like, all right, I gotta, Jamie has to meet Ben because Ben's a really good drummer, and we jammed together a little bit, and I think from that we saw some potential, and we added in a bass player who is very talented from the public high school. So once we kind of put that together, we had a band called Bushwhack in our high school days, and it was extremely experimental, kind of dream theater-y, as we say, Haken before Haken existed, a band, but kind of, I think the band was like really important to getting to Earthside because it was basically our time to experiment. So we did all of our experimentation. We tried to genre mash everything. And sometimes things worked really well and sometimes they didn't. And I think eventually we started to learn, like, figure out, okay, I like these parts of our music. Like, let's kind of focus in on these specific aspects that we really liked. And the bass player of that band left, and we ended up finding Ryan after that. And then we ended up writing The Closest I've Come. And then that was kind of the start of Earthside, basically. Was like, actually, sorry, there was an interim bassist where we wrote The Closest I've Come with him, but Sean McCusker, he's on the writing credits on the record, but
actually a better guitarist, but he's as well. Yeah.
But anyway, he ended up leaving too, and then we got Ryan. So in like 2011, basically, is when Earthside started. But all of that leading up to it is really, truly the genesis of the band, and how we got to the sound we have now was basically all of that experimentation throughout middle school and high school, and then finally landing on being the band. So yeah, there's a lot of history of us, being around and knowing each other for many years, and in a young, period of our life. Yeah. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
That was pretty encompassing. I think you did a good job condensing a really dense and all over the place kind of thing. We always make fun of on Reverb Nation, like the band bios that are like 2,000 words, and they all come down to like, it started one day in this guy's basement when this guy didn't know what to do, so he called his friend. His friend then left the band. Then another person joined the band. But then the old friend rejoined the band, and it's like, the saga never ends.
Yeah,
music, and it's like, yeah, it sounds like no one was here for the long haul to really make this very good. But yeah, no, I think Frank did a very good job with that.
Nice. What, as you guys were writing and kind of composing your sound, like, what led to this decision? I mean, to be collaborative on both A Dream and Static and the new record, to have like guest vocalists come in and.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, a real fact of life that maybe started from the earliest place is that we just never found a singer in our area that we really felt like met the music in a like we were all really trying to do something distinctive and unique on our instruments and collaboratively together to create something a whole greater than the sum of its parts. And we just didn't find a singer that like we listened to. We auditioned countless people that we listened to them on the music, and we were like, you know what, like we'd rather hear this with this singer versus we'd rather just listen to our music as it is.
Yeah.
And some of them were quite good singers, or like, but it has to, if it's just kind of like a good ordinary voice, it's not. And you have to kind of do some living, I think, to become a singer that has a voice that is just a force. And like you hear one note of it and you're like, your heart is just racing. So there was that. The band that Frank mentioned as the predecessor to Earthside was instrumental. And then it went through an awkward teen years phase where we tried to do vocals and we had a bit of an identity crisis, and I ended up being the drumming singer, which was a freaking nightmare. Like, it was us trying to kind of write vocals, like at the power of an Earthside song, the belting, the harsh stuff, but me also having to do like crazy beats under it. Just, I don't miss those days. Yeah, so we, coming out of that, when we got to the point of wanting to do Earthside, we still hadn't found that singer that we felt like suited everything. And we had also, in the time of being that previous band and becoming Earthside, had developed all these different sides to our sound, such that one singer, maybe you could get away with it if it was the right singer, but wouldn't give each song the special spice that it needed. We treat vocalists very much like an instrument. Frank will often pick very different voices for his keyboards or synths or kind of VSTs on record for each song to kind of create a very distinct atmosphere. So I'll do the same thing with the way that I'm orchestrating my drumming. Jamie will tune. This has been a little bit of a challenging thing to deal with on tour. Like every song will be in a radically different guitar tune.
Sure.
You need like a zillion guitars to play like 4 songs. But every one of us is, and also additionally to that, even we're 3 members of this band. In addition to our jams together, write our own songs, and we bring them to the band, and we will pull from very different musical stylings in those things. So there's been so much effort and thought put into everything having its own unique sound within what the band can do, that to just have one adequate singer kind of doing what they can do over these things, but not bringing a very specific and unique flair to each song, meeting the music, just kind of felt against the spirit of what we were doing. We're not against potentially having or working with one singer on like a specific album or an EP or something in the future. Time will tell. But for the first record, it made far more sense to us to work with these different distinct singers handpicked for the songs, giving them each their own unique vocal instrument. And I think it was also a helpful thing starting out to kind of have some names on the record that people knew of.
Yeah.
The second time around, that was a little less important to us, where we just really wanted every song to have as powerful and unique a voice suited to each song as possible, and really give our listeners a unique experience with each song, and maybe a new artist that they hadn't heard of that they can also discover alongside us.
Nice. Nice. Are you guys just, when you're playing live, are the vocals just a backing track?
So they are backing track for now, but we are not just kind of like playing to you on a stage, 4 dudes, and you're hearing a disembodied singer.
Yeah.
It is a multimedia kind of experience where, again, the same kind of calculus comes into doing the live thing, where we could get maybe some person to like sing some cluster of the songs. I think it would really be impossible to find a person who could humanly sing every Earthside song, just at like an adequate level. But we've seen bands who've done things loosely, kind of like what we do, and they'll get like one singer to do all the songs on record that you've heard from different voices, and it's just not that compelling. It sells the collaborations very short, and you miss out on a lot of what makes those songs special as a person who's maybe just discovering the band for the first time live. So for us, it's very important that you see and you experience those singers emoting. You're seeing and hearing that on video alongside us. They're projected alongside kind of striking visuals that suit the moments of the song, and lighting that's also contoured to the peaks and valleys of each composition. So that's the current model. And we try to kind of create a compelling and seamless beginning to end experience with the singers and the visuals and the lighting woven in.
New album's called Let the Truth Speak. When did the writing process for this album start, and how did the concept kind of come together?
The writing, I think, started late 2015
or 2016.
Late 2016. Did we start was was it the day after election day or 2 days after or something?
The day before, we wrote like a good chunk of Watching the Earth Sink. It's kind of a funny, that's the title of that song that we wrote during the 2016 election lead up and during the day of.
We started there, yeah. So yeah, basically from the end of 2016 until, I would say that we had.
Was it like beginning of 2018 that we were, because that was when we were going into track drums?
Yeah. Yeah, basically from then until the beginning of 2018. And there may have been like our own personal material that had been being worked on before then and after. So I think it was, but I think in March 2018 is when we started the actual production of the record. Well, maybe before then, because I went to Europe to record with Bård Kolstad of Leprous in February of 2018 to do the recordings for All We Knew and Ever Loved. So yeah, I think we had worked on it throughout at least maybe like a year and a half, let's say.
Well,
and then maybe slightly more depending on people's individual songs and when they started those. And then the record was basically produced between the beginning of 2018 and then finished in May of 2023 as the final mastering, something like that.
It was an endeavor.
What, I mean, obviously a pandemic happened in there, but what took so long? Just like trying to get things right and trying to pull all the pieces together?
Maybe we have slightly different answers or there's overlapping, but like the first thing is like each song had its own completely different needs and was basically like its own album production.
Okay.
So there wasn't any kind of streamlined process that could be efficient for each song. So like, All We Knew and Never Loved, you're having a completely different set of guitar tones, the pipe organ, there's brass, there's different kind of synthesizers and percussion and all this stuff. And then you have a song like The Lesser Evil. It needs a funk horn section, 8-string guitar player, like, different kinds of processing and keyboard production, different singer. So like, each album has a different singer from a different place in the world, needing their own timeline of producing and then actually finding and locking down those singers. So,
and then putting it all together too, like.
Yeah. And then, okay, so I have this organ session, this brass session, these string sessions, and these are live sessions too. Yeah. I mean, we have our own pieces of the production, our own, the stuff we program and write. And so anyway, you have editing sessions, you try to make sure the Pro Tools sessions are consolidated. So anyway, in each song, basically, like, is there a song that has less than 200 tracks on it on this record? I'm genuinely not sure. Maybe Denial's Aria. I think that doesn't.
I saw that put together. You have no idea the number of vocal layers and like.
Okay, all right. So maybe, but yeah, basically, there's no song on this album that has under 200 tracks on it. So I think it was that. Yeah, like I said, you listen to the record. It's almost like I felt like just producing one or two songs on this album are the equivalent of a band producing an entire album, just because the needs are so diverse and difficult for each individual song.
And it was a more collaborative record too. The first album was quite ambitious, especially for a band's first record. But yeah, I mean, we were beginning to work with a lot of people outside the band on that record, a lot of people who have their own lives and maybe very demanding touring or production commitments. And this record, for what we wanted to say with it and the kind of songs that we were bringing forward for it, had those needs to like an exponential level. There were just so many more people that were not in our immediate vicinity, and we were really spreading ourselves thin, whether in terms of time zones or we were having like 4 a.m. vocal sessions remotely with a guy in India. Yeah, there was just so much more here, and we bit off. I think I can say we bit off so much more than we could chew with this record, that there were many points in which it almost just the amount of attention and demand of these albums within an album level projects kind of almost sunk the project.
Man, it's like every album's a labor of love, but this is like very like, I don't know, that next level of just like everything went into each of these songs to make them like something special. And yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty on the money.
Yeah. Who did the album artwork?
Travis Smith. His company or his artist tag is Seam Pieces, but his name's Travis Smith, and he's done quite a lot of band artworks from Catatonia to Opeth and beyond. So
he also did Roman Static.
Yeah, he did our first record too. But we just, we looked at a lot of people when we were deciding, and just for some reason, his aesthetic kind of jumped out to us, and we felt like he could embody the visual or put a visual spin on what we created. Yeah. And obviously we gave him direction as to like, okay, this is what we think it should look like, and this kind of fits the theme of the record. But then it's more the way he puts it together and the I was going to say tonality, but I'm speaking in a musical way. But it's like the texturing and the vibe of it. I think definitely is what's the word I'm looking for? I can't find it, but it's in line with the vibe of the record and what the emotion of it.
Yeah, you mentioned theme. What led you guys to pick Let the Truth Speak as the title?
Well, so you have the two right people here for this. So Frank and I were having a beer after a Montreal show, I think on the Leprous tour, in late 2016, shortly before we got home and then started writing in earnest for this record. And Frank was just talking about, I don't even really remember the substance of the conversation, but Frank just said the phrase like something about art philosophically. We'll often get drawn into philosophical conversations with each other. He just said like, let the truth speak. And I think Frank, by his own admission, is less of a person of words or prose. But in that moment, I was just like, all right, yeah, hold on, pause. I'm getting my phone out. I'm writing this down. Like, that is something. Like, that is, like, it was just the collection of words I'd never heard before, but it immediately, it sounded so rich, and there were so many ways that I could think to interpret it. It sounded like a real, like, statement in a way that I think was fitting for the kind of record we wanted to make. And so I just, I was adamant that that's going to be the title of the next record. Frank very dutifully came up with the wording, but I was dead set that was going to be the title. And I think I think with a lot of good titles, there are numerous ways that you can read into it and apply it to your life and experiences. But actually, a review of the record, I thought, put this really, really well and far more concise than I could probably. And it's basically the idea that truth should speak for itself. We live in a world currently where truth is something that it could be right for you. Maybe it's not right for you. Maybe it's not right for your narrative. And anything can be put into some kind of politicized, like, smokescreen of, like, well, that doesn't fit my narrative, or the version of reality I choose to consume doesn't agree with that. So therefore, fake news or something like that. But and also in a much more kind of menacing way, the truth of the world around us, you walk outside, the things that you very directly experience, the injustices, can be easily brushed over by someone and kind of diluted, and to the point of saying, like, oh, well, it's not really that way, or I don't feel like that's the case. Like, I just, my gut's telling me I haven't experienced that myself, so that's probably not the case. And you end up talking over the people who have had those really direct experiences, who've had their lives directly impacted by these things, or are starting to be directly flooded by the climate change that we choose to accept as a very real thing, or people can experience the 5th track on our album in real life form as the beneath the waves. But yeah, I think it's reached such an absurd point in which we're all living in our own different little bubbles of what we accept as reality, and we are breaking apart and suffering greatly for it. And the record, I think, in a really deep sense, is kind of a call to step back, to kind of hold our tongues for a moment when we want to just be like, we want to just talk over the person in front of us and not acknowledge their experience, or kind of where we want to just accept what's most comfortable to us, that we have to see that the truth is out there around us. It's not something you have to go hunting for. It's right in front of us. It's just whether or not we want to acknowledge it, and we want to live in accordance with that and with the knowledge of that. And not allowing our egos to sort of drown it out.
You guys are hitting the road end of January. Is that your big push, looking to that tour beginning of January, and you have bigger 2024 plans, or because the writing process is so long, are you already thinking about the next project?
I think the whole next year is, the tour is certainly a part of this campaign for the record, and definitely a good and necessary one for it. But I mean, yeah, as you said, like, the scale of this record is so large that I think 2024 globally is more of a, what we're doing throughout the year there is going to be kind of the impact of the record. Yep. And yeah, so I'll let Ben jump in here.
I mean, I think that's the thing. It kind of goes without saying that we put everything on the line to create a piece of art that we are really proud of, and we hope and think has a chance of being something that endures over time for people. And I think we owe it to ourselves. We owe it to the people who listen to us to absolutely make the most of it and shit for all it's worth, and put out as much cool video and interview content around it that allows people to really have the material sink in and understand and appreciate it on a level that maybe isn't apparent at face value. Like the stuff that Frank's talking about, like people can just think that like we have a cool atmospheric sound, but it's like, how do you get that sound? Oh, it's like this many tracks and this many sessions. Just having more that deep understanding that a lot of people want. So yeah, that's probably where we're going to go. I think we're going to have some performance video coming out pretty soon. It would be really cool to give every one of these songs, for as different and rich as they are, their own little moment in the sun, whether it be a music video, a performance video, some kind of deep dive into the track, maybe a short film. That all that stuff is on the table, and getting out in front of as many people as we possibly can with the material, putting on as compelling of a live show as we possibly can. Wisdom for us, Frank?
Do I'm Mr. I don't have the words, but I have the wisdom. That's the trouble, being me. No, I mean, I definitely appreciate anyone who, checks out the record and really dives into it. I hope that, people can immerse themselves in this record. Definitely give it multiple listens, even if you don't like it on the first time. There have been records with a lot of depth that I've listened to the first time, and it was like, it's okay. Everyone's overhyping this or whatever. And then it starts, I start to really get into it and find new things. And then it's like, and then it just clicks with me. So I definitely encourage people to spend a little bit of time with the record. I know that we had a lot to live up to from our first record. And some people are going to be quick to say like, oh, well, they didn't deliver on this or that, maybe from the first record. Some people are already saying it's better than the first record, but regardless of wherever you come from, whatever school of thought you're in for Earthside here, yeah, I think just giving it a chance and like taking a moment to just think about the journey that we spent as artists to get there, in that unique journey that isn't really being displayed, I don't think, by maybe any other band that's out right now. And that's not to say we're better than every band, but I'm just saying to like have that in your mind as you're listening, and whether it's not your favorite album or not, I think we're offering something that's different and that you can get something out of, even if it's not your favorite record of all time. So that's what I would ask of people, and I'm happy that it's out in the world. Ben, I don't know if you want to add anything there.
No, agreed. I mean, I think what Frank discussed as far as the process of discovering something kind of new, and like, this is, there's like some cool stuff here. Maybe it's kind of weird. I don't know how I feel about it. Going from that point to like putting the pieces together with it and seeing it in full or in a fuller way is just like one of the most exciting parts about appreciating and enjoying music to me. Like, that's been my experience with every record that I've really come to love. And it's an experience that I wish that I'd like to have more And I hope people can have that experience and are open to having that experience.
Thanks for listening to As the Story Grows. Our intro music was written and composed by Jeremy Hunt. The As the Story Grows theme is by Bob Nana. If you like what you hear, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and give us a rating and review. If you'd like to support the show financially, you can join us at patreon.com/asthestorygrows. Be a part of our community and join the ongoing conversation over on Discord. If you enjoy this episode, share it on social media with your friends. Much appreciated, and thanks for listening.
I never felt so young.